Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Mikey Ames. This is the Lead Better edition for July 5th, 2025. We're talking about the field note of the day, and the field note has a title that is a longer one than, it's not the longest one we've ever had, but it's on the long side. Leaders who can't one day see themselves working for any of their team members.
Yeah.
With the description of that kind of leader. Have you known that kind of leader?
I don't know that any of the leaders that I've worked with would admit that out loud.
No,
right?
They certainly wouldn't. Yeah.
And maybe that's characteristic of this kind of leader, is that they're aware that they won't say that out loud, but they don't really actually see it happening. Right.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think that's it. But in this field note, I love the fact that this one has that swing. It's a teeter-totter, a roller coaster, whatever. There's this up and down on it because there's a whole aspect here that we can talk about in the field note that is about the very nature of leadership. How do you cultivate people? How do you bring out the best in people? How are you a guardian of their dreams and develop them to the potential where they can exceed anything that you've done in your career? But then we're adding the little bit of a twist in here, which is, could you work for that person if they excelled past you? And maybe that is, I think in the way that we often would think about this is, I've developed somebody, I'm going to step down as CEO. I'm going to become the chairman of the board. And then you now, my protege, will be the president and CEO of the company. And I'll just be an advisor over here.
Right.
But yet you still get all of the accolades.
Yes.
Different thing if you're the senior vice president and you never got to the C-suite.
Yes. You never, excuse me.
You choked up about this? Anything you need to tell us?
No, in the show Succession, this idea never comes up once, right? In the show Succession, it's always about who's going to take over when I die, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to retire and I'm going to be nowhere near any of you people. And the most telling line comes in the last couple of episodes when he tells his children, none of you are serious people, right? And so he's basically saying, not only can't I offer any of you a hand in succession, I would definitely not work for any of you, right?
Right. Oh, so for sure.
So this question never even comes up in that frame of reference, right? But he's one who admitted it out loud, right? That particular character. I don't know that I've ever worked with anybody who would not say it out loud. I think they would think of it as an indictment. I think rightfully so. They would think of it as an indictment on their own leadership if they couldn't bring themselves to see themselves that way.
Well, let me posit this then here as we were getting into the nitty-gritty of this thing.
Right.
It could be possible that this field note on the leader who can't envision themselves someday working for somebody on their team that they've developed to superstardom is a hypothetical. Maybe does that person actually exist? And here's why I'm even asking it. So when I was editing this field note, I just thought, what are some of the real life examples that we don't usually put a whole lot of extraneous material because we really want the field notes to be read in just a minute or two. They come out in the morning and you're just out the door. You can spend more time and listen to Lead Better, and we'll talk about it and unpack it. And if you like that kind of thing. Now, in this, I posed the question to a couple of the LLMs, give me some real world examples. And they really couldn't do it. They gave me examples of what I described at the beginning. The person who developed somebody and they stepped down and they became the chairman of the board. We find the problem is, even as you described in Succession, that even in advising family-owned businesses, things where there's foundations, it's very hard for that first generation to hand fully off the reins to the next generation in a way that empowers them, and then they get out of the way.
Right.
And so all of the examples I got from LLMs, and I didn't press real hard, but I got like 20 or 30 examples. And I looked at it, I was like, and I kept saying back, well, that's not exactly an example. And they're like, no, but it reflects the attitude. Like they were really about developing other people. again, this is why I'm saying it's like, maybe this is a hypothetical. Maybe this person doesn't exist. Now, I do think that we can probably think of a couple of examples that maybe would come to mind, in the sports world where somebody was a head coach and now they're an assistant coach or whatever that is. Probably not for the person that becomes the head coach and they got demoted to being the offensive line, line coordinator. I can't think of anybody right off the bat. There are head coaches who become assistants on other teams, but not on the same team, I don't think.
Right. They might come back in what feels like a new generation. And maybe
could be.
The coaching tree is probably all battered up at that point. But there's probably someone who works in the facilities who still is there at the same time. I think the quickest example that comes to my mind is something that we all kind of understand. I've watched my parents take care of their aging parents, my grandparents, in a way where my grandparents very much became the child again.
Dependent,
Yeah. And so my parents were in charge of them. So the quality of care that my parents took care of their parents as they aged, it is speaking to their ability to take responsibility and handle all sorts of things, right? And in those situations, it was, my mom had one other brother. My dad had several other siblings. My dad, especially with there was probably only one of those other siblings that could have done the job that my dad did.
Yep.
So as I think about that for my own kids, it's kind of personal. I don't want to say it out loud, but I can think of the 6 kids that I've not completely raised them all, but right now
they're getting close.
I can easily see myself giving my aged self and all the responsibilities that come to that to 2 of my 6 children, who I'd be like, even though I've got a lot more to teach them, I think that 2 of those 6 can definitely handle it.
And tomorrow,
I won't say which
Mikey's going to name them.
No. But that's close to an example. But really, as I think through that hypothetical,
oh man,
that's an indictment on me, right?
Oh, and I feel it. Yeah.
Like the best thing I could say is all 6 of them will do a fantastic job, and I have confidence in that, right?
Yeah. So look at this. So here in this field note, then the way that you were even evaluating yourself, I actually sort of think that this is the function of this field note, which is it's holding up a mirror here, right? So you can be the person, because again, if you're going through this, I love building leaders. And now the roller coaster is, I just got moved down into a lower position and they promoted the person I developed over me. I'm now down in the trough and the roller coaster has gone into this dark tunnel of selfishness and narcissism. And I'm in anguish and despair and resentment. Because what do we know? Leaders would like to say, well, of course, I'd like to develop talent and I'd be happy to report to somebody. I want people to exceed the things that I've done. And they can say that they're all about it until the all about it is all about them. And then they're not all about it as much anymore.
Right.
But here's the question, which is, it's probably almost like a lottery win that circumstance would ever actually occur. However, the self-importance that would cause you to resent that might be the thing that actually, if you start working on that, unlocks you to be thinking about how you are the guardian and developer of these people's careers and dreams and hopes and where they're going. Yes. And how specifically you get around that, because that actually will be the thing that does outlast you.
Yes. No, I think about Kristen Chenoweth, who was an alum at the school that the dance school that my son attended. So here's this famous alum. She came back for several things, while he was a student there. And there's a handful of people teaching still when Kristen Chenoweth was a student there, right? And, the ego that many of these performers would have had to see Kristen have the kind of career that she had, right? That probably happened dozens of times with people who aren't as famous as Kristen Chenoweth, who went through this school, and teachers who definitely had aspirations for that, right? They were ambitious at some point about their own career. And is it a defeat? Like you'd have to kind of go through a new identity that says, me being a performer who is renowned is something I'm putting on the back shelf of my career, of my life, of my identity. And now I'm adopting this new role that says I'm going to help others to be able to get as far as possible, right? I don't think you could do that for many years unless you've gone through that identity change. To live with the bitterness that these stupid freshmen are going to outpace me on Broadway, right?
Right.
You wouldn't last long as a teacher, right? But it's almost like that new identity, that is where you now develop excellence.
Yeah.
That is, your pedagogy becomes much more important to you than your performance, right?
Yeah.
At that point.
Look, I think there's some real applications in the arts and probably even in tech areas. You probably have some companies where there's been a founder and maybe one is more the marketing person, the other person is more technical, and perhaps there's somebody on the team. And there was a little bit of this, you could say, in the Eric Schmidt dialogue, kind of with the guys that started Google. As he coached and developed, and then later he took a role. But again, nobody was really being demoted. I think I can think of a couple of cases, and I don't maybe have names on top, where somebody was like, okay, I'm the CEO or I'm the president of this, but I actually just want to go back to being the developer, right? Just, I want to go back to running the coding team or whatever it is. And we've developed somebody else, but they also still know you own, you've got all the stock and you're the only billionaire in the room. Even if you said, I'm not that good at that. There was one startup I was a part of in digital news and digital media, where at the beginning it was just me and 3 other people. And eventually it was 300 people. But along the way, it was like, all right, I kind of said, well, I'm wearing all the hats here. How are we doing on sales and what's going on with tech? And let's do the development and let's do the editorial and all that. And I was like, oh, well, wait, let's just hire a person who's really good at running everything. Let's hire somebody who's really good at sales. And let's hire somebody who's the tech person. And those people all took those positions. And then I just kind of focused on the content. But the truth is, those people were already really excellent that we brought in to run those divisions. They weren't people I had developed. So the question would be more, if it had been somebody on my team who's 10 years younger than me, and all of a sudden they're the president and they're giving me orders, how does that go? Again, I'm saying it might be a hypothetical. And I think you just kind of have to look in the mirror and say, even if this never happens, how bad do I want to be the kind of leader who does develop people no matter where they go? I would like to see the example where there's somebody who was the head coach and they lost the job and somebody else becomes the head coach that they developed. And they say, I'm hiring this guy back to come and to say, I want to come back and be your assistant coach. I do want to be the quarterback's coach or whatever. And I don't need to be the head coach again because you're better than I am. And to come back to the same city where everybody reviled me because, we went 6-7 or 6-9 that year and didn't make the playoffs. Would that be an amazing thing? I don't know. We have yet to see it. So I'd like to look at, people have examples, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear about one where the purity of what's described in this field note actually played out. That could be a great thing.
Yeah, it might happen a lot more in lower level positions. It might happen in fast food management more than anything else, right? I could see that kind of thing happening quite a bit. So there might be some more individual examples. Why is it that we don't hear about this as a storied example? Might be because the kinds of people who do this are choosing to change their story. Like, their role in the story is now the Gandalf character, right? They may have started off thinking that they were going to be the one carrying the ring, and somewhere along the line they realized they were the Gandalf character. And so if you're going to step into that role, the story's not about you, right? And therefore you're not putting the life and times of Gandalf out there as like the thing that needs to be told. That's not the story we're interested in. We're following the ring up up Mount Doom, and it doesn't matter where Gandalf is in that moment when Sam and Frodo are up there together. And so it might be that's why we don't have some famous examples of it, is because we don't write and tell stories that way. Right?
No, that's probably true. And in the last couple of seconds here, I'll just kind of say, we just kind of got to get over ourselves in general. You're not probably like things that I helped start and left at some point. And you're kind of like, well, can it get along without me? Well, yeah, all of those things still exist that I was a part of and thrive in one way or the other. And I saw somebody post, I think it was Chris Williamson quoting I think it was Alex Hormozy, that the Queen of England died 18 months ago, right? She had an entire nation, all the countries around the world in the empire, accumulated vast amounts of wealth, and that you probably haven't even thought about her in the last 18 months until we just mentioned it, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
no matter how big you are or where you think you're going, you're going to die too, and the
Yes.
world's going to move on. And what they will remember is how you invested in the other people and helped their dreams come true. So take that with you.
Right. No, I saw that Charles got his face on some money here.
Yeah, that's true.
And I didn't even think about his mom when that was announced. Yeah. Right. So
Saturday edition here of Lead Better. So that's great. Thanks, Mikey.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Probably Monday, maybe Sunday.
Great. Yeah, probably Sunday.